King Charles will not have to pay inheritance tax on the Duchy of Lancaster Estate he inherited from the Queen due to a 1993 rule allowing assets to be passed from one sovereign to another. This is according to Insider. The Queen's private estate is worth more than $750 million.
According to financial records, the Lancaster estate generated revenue of £24 million or 27 million American dollars. Yes, let's convert this to American dollars. It's an American show. The king is now entitled to its income. And you know what? Good for him. But I think the peasants should also not have to pay inheritance tax, or as we call it in libertarian circles, death tax, the tax on dying. Not a tax I'm super enthusiastic about.
It is an interesting contradiction from my perspective within the broadly conservative ideology that says that everyone should work for what they get, that, you know, people shouldn't get a free ride, there's no free lunch. But the expectation is that the children of people who are rich should be able to also be rich without any consequence whatsoever in terms of taxes and their broader contribution to the society that they live in, and which they benefit from having a good infrastructure and being able to service their business objectives, right? So I don't know. I obviously understand the idea of generational wealth. A lot of people with a historical background, like my own families who weren't historically able to engage in some of the activities that allow you to create generational wealth, weren't allowed to buy houses in certain neighborhoods, were subject to redlining, don't have the same property wealth that has been passed down for generations, are very invested in real estate and some of these traditional means of processing and distributing generational wealth. But at the same time, I think that it's an endemic of a broader systemic issue where there are people, to less extreme degrees than King Charles, who are able to aggregate huge sums of money that I think frankly come at the expense of workers who aren't getting the fair benefit of their own labor. And then in the wealth tax, it might be an imperfect way to try to claw that back, but I think that's what's going on here.
I would say that one of the main reasons people work hard, people try to earn a lot of money, is not just for themselves, but to provide a better life, an easier life for their children. That was a major driver of immigrant desire to come to America, not just a better life for themselves, but for the families they want to have. So it always strikes me as a little cruel to have the government come and confiscate a huge sum of money from you when you're trying to leave it to your kids. It's also weird because it just kicks in if you die, but you can obviously find some ways of. There's many loophole type strategies that is a significant problem to structure it, and that will help. And very wealthy people, right, know exactly how to set up those things, so they are truly passing on a much larger percentage of their assets to their children, because you can. I mean, in some ways, you can just write a bigger birthday check. It's when you die. It's when you die that it happens.
I definitely agree. The problem with the biggest problem with the inheritance tax is that only poor people are paying the inheritance tax.
Right. Yep.
But the UK is projected to spend an estimated $9 million on Queen Elizabeth's funeral amid warnings the country is headed toward a recession and skyrocketing costs of living. And surveys showing that over 2 million people in the UK cannot afford to eat. It seems as though King Charles got frustrated with a pen during the signing ceremony as well in Northern Ireland yesterday. Let's watch that.
Oh God, I'm wrong date. 13.
Yes, sir.
You signed 12:30.
Where did I go to? I signed 10. Oh God, I hate this.
Oh God, I hate this.
So nobody got to
Where is that? There, this bloody thing. What they do is everyone's stinking.
See, I was definitely just channeling Charles earlier on the show when I hurled a pen across this table in anger.
Pens are hard. Look, King Charles has been on the job for less than a week and apparently is very frustrated with the volume of his duties here, the difficulty of his duties signing that document. And people have been, I think, making fun of this clip and generally remarking on it, in part because there is this huge, gap, this dissonance between how much money he gets without having earned it and the fact that his duties are so limited and difficulty.
Yeah, now is probably a good time to just abolish the monarchy, to be frank. I know you have more mixed feelings about Queen Elizabeth than I do, but he's not going to live up to her in terms of how adored she was, and also he also won't live up to my favorite English monarch by far, which is Charles II, who was restored to power after Oliver Cromwell was done with the kind of interregnum there, and is a great king who just loved theater and dressing up as a peasant and having bastard children with all his mistresses. That's a king I can get behind. There wasn't a lot of cruelty. He barely even hung, drawn, and quartered anyone. Just the literal people who executed his father, but almost no one else.
All right,
and he was secretly Catholic,
well, look,
like all monarchs should be.
My reasons for wanting to abolish the monarchy have a lot less to do with whether or not a particular monarch is likable, and more to do with the fact that I think we should have democracies where people control their own rule, and that money isn't filtered to affluent people who sit around on golden crowns pontificating about how they have to we have to work hard to help the people, just not by melting down my chair.
It would seem like maybe they could have paid for. It's really true. The Queen's funeral was paid for in public.
The state supports their entire lifestyle.
It's crazy. Yeah, we would. This is why we don't have a monarchy here. We would not. We
because we fought a war of independence so that we wouldn't have a monarchy.
I want to have another war of independence all over again. I'm so outraged by this lavish display.
Well, that's the thing, and we got off easy compared to a lot of other colonial subjects in the UK. So, I think that perhaps in the early days, the first few days after Queen Elizabeth's passing, there wasn't necessarily an openness to talking about her legacy and the legacy of the monarchy. But we're going to definitely continue to be having those conversations as people kind of put the mourning for the woman and the individual in the rearview mirror and start to talk about the institutional framework that Brits have held on to for such a long time, and people all over the Commonwealth still have her on her money and still have these kind of legal and institutional ties to the crown.
I think it can both be true that she was an inspiring figure to many people, a source of national strength, but also part of an institution that really does not make a lot of sense in the modern era.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Both things are definitely true.
More Rising right after this.